Divorce is a tough subject. It's not fun, and if the statistics are correct, about 50% of the families in this country are having to deal with divorce. And Jesus says a lot about divorce. Hello world, I'm David Dorn, and this is Preposterous, which is not your typical Bible study. This is a tough episode because it's dealing with a subject that brings a lot of pain and hurt to a lot of people. And everybody knows someone who's divorced. And Jesus has a lot to say about it. And we're going to look here in Matthew 5, verse 31 and 32, as we're walking through Matthew chapter 5, about what Jesus says on this topic. Matthew 5, 31 through 32. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, we can't fully understand what Jesus is saying about divorce until we look at what God's plan is for marriage. Let's look at a few things. In Genesis 2:18, it says, "The Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." And if you skip down to verse 24, it says, "That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." And Jesus expands on this in Matthew chapter 19, and he said, "So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." God planned for two lives to be melded together in one unit. That marriage is to be a man and a woman with different perspectives on life to come together in a committed relationship that lasts a lifetime and bring out the best in each other. Now, in Matthew chapter 19, where Jesus goes on to explain this further, the religious leaders come up to Jesus and they ask him, they say, "Why then did Moses allow people in the Old Testament to get divorced?" And you have to understand, back then, you could get divorced for anything. Taking too long in the bathroom to get ready? Pfft, see ya. You burnt the cake again? Forget it, you're gone. You're not making me happy anymore? Get out of town. And Jesus looked at the religious leaders and he replied to them, "It's because your hearts were hard. Your hearts were closed off from what God's intention was. And Moses just got tired of listening to you. So therefore, he allowed you to get divorced. But that's not what God intended." And then Jesus in Matthew chapter 19 reiterates what he says in Matthew 5, that the only grounds for divorce is sexual immorality. And if you marry somebody who is divorced for anything other than that, you're committing adultery. God takes marriage seriously and the commitment seriously, so the only criteria for God is that somebody cheated on somebody. But in the world that we live in, what is cheating now? We saw last week that porn and lust leads to adultery in the heart. Jesus even said that. And if that is the criteria, haven't we all done that at some point in our lives? We've all lusted. We've all seen things and thought about things and desired things that were not for our spouse. So the question is, are we all guilty of this? More on that in a minute, but what it seems is that God is making a connection between what is in our heart and what we do in reality. And that what is in our heart needs to line up with the way we treat the person we're committed to. God's perfect plan for marriage is that a man and a woman, they come together, they do life together through thick and thin. But what happens when that plan falls apart? We live in a world where sin is present and relationships do fall apart. Why? Because we have a choice. We get to choose. And some of us don't choose love. And some of us can't control what the other person in the relationship chooses. And we all are flawed people. Now, I believe that God can heal and restore marriages and families, but that requires everyone to be willing for Him to do that. And let's face it, some of us have hard hearts. Some of us are in bad situations that we really do need to get out of. And some of us just want to move on. Whether it's both people's fault or just one person's fault or no one's fault, some marriages do end in tears and pain. What happens then? You see, there's this little thing about God that I absolutely love, and it's His grace. And God's grace forgives us when we don't deserve. It heals us when we're hurting. It restores us when we're broken, and it loves us all the time. And I truly believe that even when we screw up this plan of marriage, that God has another plan for us, and it is good. God is a God of second chances, and not just one-time second chances, but perpetual second chances, because that is His grace. And I'm not just talking about adults here. I think God gives second chances to families. But the question is, are we inviting Him into our situation? But what I'm taking from this, and what I'm taking from the previous few weeks, is that we need to guard our hearts and our desires. The past few weeks, we've been talking about how Jesus is saying that what is in your heart and what your desires are focused on affects everything about you. So before you're married, guard your heart and lead your heart. And once you're married, you certainly need to guard your heart and lead your heart. Emotions come and go, but you can choose what you desire. You can choose who to love, and you can choose to lead your heart in a direction. And by God's grace, our choices can hold us and our marriages can last. But now it's your turn to do something. This week, I want you to pray for your parents every day, whether you like your parents or not. And whether your parents are married or they're divorced, pray for them and pray for their relationships. They need that. They need someone interceding for them and inviting God into their situations. And if you are married, pray for your spouse every day. Prayer is the invitation for God to be God in your life and in your situation. But if you have a personal story about divorce, leave it in a comment or a video response. I would like to look at that, but I would like to share that with everyone next week. And if you have a question about divorce, talk to your youth pastor, or you can leave a comment or tweet me, and I would love to be able to talk with you about it. But my wife was divorced before we got married, and I'm okay with that. But I have seen God's grace at work in a very personal way. So what is your story? But make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube, and you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you're a youth pastor, make sure you go to the link down below and sign up on the website so that we can send you updates throughout the week. Check out these comments from last week's episode. But I hope that you realize that we all have choices. And even when we don't make the best choices, God's grace meets us there. I hope you have a great day. God bless.